General Protocol Spaces, Banking on Freedom.
All right. We have everyone here. Welcome to General Bull number 21 of N. We're here with 2QX. Thank you for coming on, 2QX. It's nice to talk with you for the first time, actually, for me. This is, so welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining us. Really, it's really good to talk with people, and it's not a thing that all of us working online all the time get a chance to do often, actually, rarely enough. So thank you for coming. Yes, and we're going to talk about some of the things that 2QX is working on, maybe some of the related things that 2QX is interested, and then we'll see where the conversation goes. Now, the number one thing, 2QX has done a lot of things. Do you want me to give a quick intro, or do you want to give an intro to 2QX on the things you've done in the past before we get to the current stuff that you're working on?
Yeah, I can give. I thought you were going to ask me, when I bought my first Bitcoin.
No,
so,
Imagine buying your first Bitcoin.
Imagine buying
about. Yeah, so the way that I got into Bitcoin, I've been in Bitcoin since 2011, and I was sort of educated and trained as a builder, and I went out, beelined it out of college to the edge of civilization to build. And so I was in a place without, a lot of internet, and it was a little difficult. It was a dangerous place where, survivability was a bit tricky at times, and the people there were very good at surviving. And so a lot of my experience is actually not my own. It was just given to me by them. They would tell me all the tricks. And so they had to deal with conflict and disease and poverty. And so one of the things that they taught me is like how to, build a resilient community and sort of build a survivable community. And so I feel like, our values as a Bitcoin Cash community are sort of also present here. Like we're being led by a similar set of values. Anyway, so I heard about Bitcoin. I didn't have internet at the time, on the BBC on one of those little Nokia phones. And I had witnessed enough of the survivability problem that I knew that I needed money, and it needed to work 99% of the time, 5 nines, when I needed it to work, or when I needed it to work for somebody that, I was sending it to. And so that's sort of how I got hooked on Bitcoin and how I've stayed in Bitcoin up until this point. Even though, I've since retired from that career, I want the Bitcoin that's going to work, with 5 nines, that's going to get me on a plane or over a fence.
Absolutely.
Or,
yeah.
Get me, out of a housing insecurity situation in a pandemic, if there's going to be one. And so, yeah, I've been in Bitcoin, and I've stayed along this unique path that we're on, and at every fork. I don't think it's that tricky to pick the right fork, but apparently it is.
I didn't think it was either, but apparently, yeah, exactly.
And so,
oh wow, that's interesting. All right. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So I pivoted. I had different personas earlier when I had some downtime. I was shopping a startup that I had built, but like my values don't align with American business values, so my startup was worthless. And so and the people that I wanted to sell it to really bad turned out to be not good people. Anyway, so it's going to sound like I pivoted full time into BCH because of the pandemic, but it's not actually that simple. So I quit my job in March of 2020 without any kind of safety net or unemployment. And I decided that I wanted to focus full time on developing stuff for Bitcoin Cash. And so it's not, I expected something like COVID to happen around 2023. I thought it was maybe like a 10-year event, just given the status or the way that public health has gone in the US over the last 50 years. And so when it happened, I was, ready for it to happen. And I knew some things that I wanted to do during COVID. But it's also like I would expect something like it to happen probably much more frequently than somebody else. Like people talk about it like it's a 100-year event, and I don't think so. And from my previous experience, because I would listen to people who had lived through 3 or 4 of these things.
Right.
They would just tell me what was going to happen.
And when you say these, you mean like some kind of outbreak of something that is not well controlled locally and
precisely
has very serious health impact on the people around. Yeah.
They would tell me, go to the doctor and get your dental work done now, or there's going to be a run on this food item now.
Oh, wow.
Or there's going to be an increase in crime, or this is going to go on for this long. And so I pivoted into BCH because I was anticipating a moderate amount of inflation, like 50% thereabout devaluation in the dollar. But also for the next one, because the second time that it's like playing a board game of Monopoly, like the second time you play it, once everybody knows how to play it, it's a very different game. And I don't want to be playing the game of pandemic with people who have played it once before.
Okay.
So I started in 2020. I was trying to build a wallet in the browser to build like a neutrino style wallet.
Yeah.
Off of this
using neutrino protocol.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had coded up like the GCP block filtering in a web worker, and I had a little database that I was storing the block headers in, and I had my own gRPC client working in like a web worker. And so basically I wanted to see how much of like a neutrino app I could get just loading on a phone as fast as possible, which was kind of a silly idea now that I realized it. And so Simon wrote his proposal for mainnet.js, mainnet.cache in August, and he sort of did an open call for anybody interested in, and I bit, and I took a little test, and then we started. He wrote the API like spec,
really,
and then I wrote the implementation for it. So he said, I want this function to be named this, and then take these parameters, and then I went and I implemented it. And so for people that don't know, mainnet.js and mainnet cache is kind of a bigger complicated project than it might seem. So it is a JavaScript library, TypeScript library. That's a normal thing. But then on top of that, or behind that, there is a Swagger or OpenAPI spec that does exactly what the JavaScript implementation does, but it does it over REST. So if you don't want to write your backend in JavaScript, you don't have to. You could write it in Python, or he wrote noise.cache in PHP. So
okay.
He never wrote any JavaScript to use mainnet.cache.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, he contributed sometimes to the project, but basically, and I didn't work at all. We were completely siloed from mainnet.cache. I was. So his developers hosted REST at a mainnet.cache instance, Docker instance, and they got back the response that they wanted from the JavaScript behind the scenes. And you could do that with any language. So, if you want to call
like an
smart contract,
inverted picture of the standard app.
So if you want to call like cache script, but you're writing in C or something, or Rust, you can just post your JSON REST at mainnet.cache Docker image, and it'll send you back the results as if you were doing it in JavaScript.
Right.
So
let me quickly give a little bit of context to people who are listening. So the thing that you were working on before was some kind of in-browser neutrino wallet, and what that means is it's basically just a wallet like any other, but the way that it communicates with the network or with like an indexing server is different, and it preserves your privacy better than the simple way that most wallets work. It's a pretty smart way of grabbing data from the network without revealing who is asking for the data. And yeah, so it's a better way of getting your wallet's data in a private way that's still fully verifiable. Is that a fair description, 2QX?
Yeah, so the way that it works is you would create some filter and subscribe to that filter, and then the node would scan all of the blocks, and if you might have a transaction in the block, your filter will hit, but you can also get false positives. So maybe you have to download a block, but you don't have any transactions in there.
Right.
So yeah, to be downloading full blocks in the browser. So I know from my experience, if there is an 8 megabyte block and my user has to download it, it might not download nicely for some users on some internet.
Yeah. And especially not in places where, like you were talking about, where everything's not all sunshine and rainbows all the time. Yeah.
Right. I learned how to really like get the most out of a 2G cellular connection.
There you go. Yeah.
Like I was sharing an internet with a country that most people have in their homes in the developed world. So I was sharing it with millions and millions of people, and yeah, it's very, very difficult. Surprisingly difficult for people to even download like a 50 megabyte wallet.
Right.
And some wallets are now like a quarter of a gig.
Yeah, it's insane.
That's just a deal breaker. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So the Neutrino wallet in the browser, I don't know if that's a viable idea. I didn't get that very far into it. And BCHD, as we know, is like it might be coming back, but it's off on hiatus for a bit. So hopefully,
yeah, I think there's also a modified version of Neutrino that's been discussed a few times. You might know the details, or you might know the details better too. But it's a smarter way of breaking blocks down into pieces instead of doing whole blocks, because as the blocks grow, it becomes less and less
you have to
feasible to just download the whole block.
Some additional scheme of partial blocks or something.
Yeah. But yeah, I think Neutrino could make a comeback at some point. I know there was a working Neutrino wallet back in 2019 that BCHD made, that Josh Ellithorpe had, and he had it running on his phone, and he was running around at the conference in Australia in Townsville, and he was using the Neutrino wallet back then.
I had it. I was a user of that wallet.
Nice.
And I was sort of surprised to see that the BTC people are actually still using Neutrino, the Neutrino protocol. Somebody had mentioned it in one of the channels the other day, and I was like, well, does anybody over on the other side use it? And yeah, they are using it. So the technology is still being kept up, and it is practical, I guess, for some people to use. But
yeah, I think the problem with Neutrino, I mean, it's not a problem that's specific to that protocol, but the general problem is that the network level privacy is already a niche thing. And then combine that with light wallets, light SPV wallets. That's also, I mean, I really hate to say this, but it's also becoming sort of a niche thing. And then you combine this one niche thing with another niche thing, and then it becomes a super niche, and and so you end up with very few people wanting to interested in using or developing for it, and that's kind of an unfortunate situation, but which is what I can also understand. And on BCH, like people who really care, like I actually do really care about privacy, but what I concluded is that well, it's easy enough to just run a node and run my own Fulcrum server and open it up to the public. So that's like basically ironclad privacy for me. I don't, and that's good enough. I guess the private light wallet thing might become useful one day when we have ginormous blocks, but yeah, I'll worry about that later.
I think it'll come into its own at some point. I think it was just a little bit ahead of its time.
Yeah.
That kind of thing will
it's way ahead
happen.
of its time. So that's kind of unfortunate. I wish I wish there would be more people who care and to future proof us, but that's not where we're at right now.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get there. Okay, so that was neutrino. Sorry, I wanted to make a little bit of an explanation. Just that it's basically like a additional privacy for when your wallet connects to the network. So that's a nice thing to have. And then you were saying you worked on mainnet and all of this stuff about mainnet. And for that, if I'm correct, correct me if I'm wrong, the underlying motivation there was as the kind of all the code and back end and front end and machinery that was needed to run noise.cash and then the kind of a social media website noise.cash and then before that read.cash. Is that right? Like that's what emerged from those projects. Is that correct?
So I think it was just noise. So Simon realized with read.cash that he needed a library of, a new library. And so noise.cash was the first user of mainnet.js. And I think he really wanted the common interface in the browser and on the back end to do very common wallet type things, simple wallet type things. So it's just a very simple, like ephemeral WIF wallet, like a wallet import format or a BIP 39 12-word seed phrase wallet. And so, yeah, the goal was basically to let anybody into Bitcoin Cash programming, like app development, with a code pen or like a snippet, and then to let
because
them
you could go
use
through
that.
the interface, not necessarily through the library directly. Okay.
Yeah, so it just gave basically however you wanted to, wherever you wanted your code to live, whether you wanted to live in the browser or a static web page. I think hop.cash used mainnet.js. It's just like a static web page. Wherever your programming context was, mainnet.js can run, or you can use mainnet.cash or mainnet.js with a common interface from wherever you program, basically. This is the goal. And it should be consistent and the same in both cases. So,
okay, I got it. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I wanted to get that across and make sure I didn't get anything wrong there. Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted you. So yeah, you've had your history is much better than the one I was going to tell. That was great. I didn't know about that part of your past. And then from there, what has happened since then?
So I built mainnet.js with a specific eye towards maintainability. So our server node is partially programmatically generated. So when we add new features, we update the spec and then we hit generate, and that stubs out the endpoints that we have to then program, fill in. Okay. So it's a more maintainable way of maintaining an API. And then we were very, very picky about what libraries we imported. JavaScript is kind of weird because there's Java that runs on servers and Java that runs in browsers. And they don't necessarily go, JavaScript doesn't necessarily play well with each other, the two different contexts. And so I tried as much as possible to only use stuff that would work in every JavaScript context. So we don't write special code for the browser and special code for the backend. It's all the same, hopefully.
Okay.
I think there are some exceptions there. And then we also used BitJSON's wonderful liboff library, which I could not. It's such a wonderful library, liboff. And if anybody looking at mainnet.js and is like, this is not for me, I encourage everybody to go to liboff if you want to program in JavaScript and you want access to all the common cryptographic functions and a common way to manipulate data, because anything that you could want for Bitcoin Cash is there already. It's just a lower level. And so with the Cash Tokens chip, the first implementation of Cash Tokens in JavaScript was liboff. And that was done in November of last year, not the year before last. So Pat had done the SLP implementation and the Smart BCH implementation for mainnet.js, and I had sort of been eating my invoices, just not sending them back to Simon for my maintenance work, because I knew that there was like a finite amount of money left in the budget. And so there was enough money left that Pat, like, you know, picked up the project again. I think he might have taken a break, or he's much faster at programming than I am. I'm sort of like a tortoise and he's like the hare. And so he can go in very quickly and do things, and I have to be, you know, if I'm exerting energy, I have to be more methodical about it. So together we're a good team, I think. So he did the cache token implementation really wonderfully, and then I was off doing a new project, which we'll get to. And then I've since come back to do more maintenance work while Pat has gone on to his project. So we tag team the maintenance of mainnet.js basically now.
That's great. I have two questions that came out of that. That was interesting to hear. So one is, could you say a little bit more for the audience, like what is it that you, and for me too, what is it that you like about libauth, like in a little bit more detail? And then, because you had some nice words of praise there. And then the other, well, yeah, how about that one first? Like, what is it that you like about libauth? Because I also like it, but you've worked with it much more than I have. I have worked with it only in passing when I had to come into contact with it for whatever we're doing on BCH Bull and AnyHedge and so forth. But I've definitely not worked with it extensively. Some of our team have, but I haven't. But could you tell us in your words, like, what is it that you liked about it?
So it's pretty complete. It's huge, and Jason had the same principle when he built it of making it interoperable in the browser and elsewhere. So he's not using any special JavaScript. That's any JavaScript library that doesn't use special JavaScript is okay by me. But
it has no dependencies, right? I think it has 0 dependencies, if I remember correctly.
I don't know if I believe that, but it's probably pretty close. If it's not none, I'm sure he's got maybe that is the case. I know that there's some software that he uses to build it, at least.
Right. That's true. And then there's a QR code generator, which it depends on, but he wrote it also.
Yeah. That project is also incredible. He wrote that in, I think, 2017 or 2018. And I looked at it and I was like, there's no way that works anymore. There's no way. And so one day he just like turned it on, or like did an official release, and he's like, yeah, I did this 5 years ago and it still works, and he didn't change anything. So if you pick the right technology, which clearly Jason is able to do, it makes the maintenance role a lot easier. So yeah, the other thing, the final thing, the nice thing is he went into this with a longer talk on the podcast, but it's very consistent in the functional programming aspect. Yeah. And what that means, functional programming, is you put in your input, and there is something that you want done to it, your function, and then you get your output, and that's the end of the affair. So there is no state that you're setting. There is no data that's being permutated. There's nothing, every time that you call it, you're going to get the same result. And so that sort of philosophy has made it's really clean, and it also makes it more maintainable. So
yes, and it forces you into very clean patterns, or else it just doesn't work. So yeah, I also really appreciate that aspect of it, the functional aspect of it.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people using it now, so it's sort of become convenient for everybody to not do the weird JavaScript stuff with different ways of encoding binary information. Like you get a private key, and the private key could be in hex, or it could be binary, or a blob, or a buffer. And the endianness is, what is it even? And so there's a bunch of pitfalls that you can get in with, 8 different permutations there. But if everybody's just using, unit 8 vectors, it's kind of nice. Unit 8 arrays.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're using a number of the little utilities that are in there for pretty extensively throughout our projects. And now I think also adding a JSON, custom JSON parser so that apps can have a consistent way to communicate, or apps or libraries, whatever, can have a consistent way to communicate, with without having to use some kind of custom format. Yeah.
I just upgraded our BIP39 implementation in mainnet, but I think that libauth might also be getting that
Yes.
cryptographic function too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, Jim. I think that's something that Jim. Jim is also the one kind of encouraging the JSON and Pat. So yeah, that and then the BIP39 one. Yes, libauth is kind of becoming the Swiss Army knife of little tools that you can use for everything.
yeah, I think I have a branch of it somewhere with a QR scanner in it that I wanted. I wanted a WASM QR scanner in libauth. I didn't ask
Jason's
anybody
like,
about
oh,
that.
I wrote that 10 years ago, and he like whips
I
out
wrote
his
that 10 years ago.
It's like a common pattern with him. He's like, right, oh yeah, I've been working on that since 2014, but I haven't worked on it for a few years. It's like, what?
Yeah, the comments on issues from 2015 is a bit much, so
Nice.
yeah.
Okay, so the second question I had was about this is for the developers out there who are listening. So there's a libauth, which, as we've been talking about it here, that's what it is, and then there's mainnet. And I know that many people, they come in and they're like, hey, I want something simple. Like they look at libauth and they're like, I have no idea what this does, because it is quite an open toolbox. It's not like a hierarchical toolbox that has everything sorted. Like this is what you need for this is what you need for that. It's more like a pro toolbox that has all the shit laid out. You got to know what you want more or less when you get into it. But would you say that mainnet is an alternative to that, even if you don't want to use some aspects of it? Like,
so what I
how
call
do they
it
compare?
is, when I started writing mainnet, there were no wallets written with libauth.
Right.
So Cache Script had used it, and I don't know if any other I'm sure some projects used it, but Cache Script was the most extensive use of it. And there was I realized this after, I think I realized it like a year or two ago, like there was no Stack Overflow for me. So I had to go into libauth and look at all the examples to write the wallet that's in mainnet. So it's like the de facto high level or low level wallet implementation. So the low level functions are in libauth, but if you want to be sending, and receiving money and doing the easy stuff, mainnet.js is just a wrapper for libauth. It's just sugar on top. That's how I describe it. And so that's a good... you tell the developers to just use mainnet.js, and then people look at it and they have different tastes or different opinions, and mainnet.js is opinionated. They're not my opinions, they're Simon's, but I think I really appreciate the way that it works, because he sort of thought about how you would store data elsewhere. So if you don't like Simon's, the way that he designed it, or the way that it's implemented, you can use mainnet.js as a reference implementation to write your own wallet. So the Selene wallet, I'm not taking credit for it, but they had originally they originally built it with mainnet.js, and they basically grew out of mainnet.js immediately, I think within 6 months. So they switched to using libauth directly for their needs, because they wanted to do more advanced stuff than mainnet.js could do. So it can be a stepping stone. So you can, if you just want to sit down in 20 minutes and get some Bitcoin and send it, or do a Cache Script contract or test a Cache Script contract, mainnet.js is great. And if you have like a social app where you want to add a Bitcoin Cache component, mainnet.js is great. But if you want to get into sophisticated stuff like a fully featured wallet, libauth is the way to go.
All right, that's great. That's perfect. Yeah, I know there's Yeah, we used LibOp didn't well, it existed, but it wasn't in a functional state when we started working on any hedge stuff back in 2000, what was it, 18, 19. And so we had to do a bunch of stuff by hand, a lot of things. It was a ridiculous moment in history of development in BCH. But then eventually we got to LibOp and we were able to replace a lot of the stuff that we were doing. And it was just such a much world better than Bitbox. And there was Bitbox before, which was kind of the same idea of an easy way to get started. But the problem was with Bitbox, when you outgrew it, which was quickly, you would open up the box and it was like, a, a giant just tangle of wires and it just wasn't manageable, right? But when you open up mainnet, the thing that you've worked on, it's like, oh, okay, it's a bunch of maintainable stuff and layers underneath. So I really appreciate where we are today compared to where we were back then.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it has great maintainability. Like I do maintain it. I wouldn't say I would feel comfortable just like handing it off to the next generation blind. But the functional programming aspect of libauth makes it so that if everything in mainnet JS is also kind of a function. It sort of copies out the functional aspect. There is some state in mainnet JS when you make a wallet for Alice or Bob, obviously. But you can sort of swap in and out parts, and you could just open up mainnet JS and not use it at all and just use it as an example. So
exactly.
People come into the libauth channel and they're like, how do I sign a transaction? And I
go look over there.
A lot of the common things you want to do, like the implementation. If you don't want to look through the examples, the tests in libauth, then the examples are always in mainnet.js. So
right. Yeah, it's very nice. Yeah. That's what I meant. Like I mean, it may or may not be maintainable, probably 1,000 times more maintainable than Bitbox was. I mean, that did its purpose and it worked for its purpose. I'm not trying to say something bad about it, but when it comes to being able to open it up and then be like, oh, I want that part, that wasn't something you could really do. So that is something you can do now. So yeah, I like it. Okay, maybe shall we get on to what you're working on now, or is there any other things you'd like to cover? You've got a lot.
Well, so there's one part that we skipped.
Okay.
If somebody is interested in becoming a Bitcoin Cash developer, I can tell you what they're going to do.
Right.
The first thing that everybody does is they go and they make a list of all the things in Bitcoin Cash so that they can keep track of it, because it's maddening to keep track of. Right? So
yes. An actual decentralized ecosystem is actually maddening to track. Yes.
Right. So everybody, there's lots of people, and I also did it. And so I think I launched Awesome Bitcoin Cash it was like Armory was like having the meeting where he was going to blow everything up in like April of 2020 or something. God. And okay. I announced it during that meeting just inadvertently, and I could tell that he saw it because he said something about how it's not like a rocket ship. And I was like, oh. And so my innovation with mainnet Awesome Bitcoin Cash is that I add stuff to it, but I also take stuff off of it every week if it needs to be taken off.
Now that is rare.
Right. So I think IMU name will correct me, but I use something called Lyc, which is a link checker. And it basically goes and hits every link in the README file, which is why it's ugly, because it's just one flat file. And so I get an email every Sunday that says like, hey, like this 404, this 403, and this, whatever, did not respond. And so I get a sort of vitality check on all the project leaving the space. Like, and I am always the one to come in and be like, is why Bitcoin Cash down or whatever. And that's the secret hack, is that I have a checker going. So I have an idea now that I've been doing it for 4 years.
I'm writing this up for Twitter right now.
Well, I mean,
when somebody else comes and decides that.
Sorry. I'm just saying that would catch people at the last stage of their dysfunction, which is when their website like completely goes out of completely goes out from lack of payment or whatever. But
Yeah,
you
it's usually the SSL certificate goes first, and then the domain.
yeah, but usually the activity goes down like way before that happens. So this reminds me of like simpleledger.cash.
Yeah,
Okay, I
I mean, there
posted it
are
up
some
there.
projects where.
Yeah.
So the idea for the next person who inevitably someone will come and do it next month, and so in addition to using a link checker to keep track of when sort of projects fell off. So right now I think I have like 350 commits, and I would have to go through all those links to just make a list of, you know, what used to exist and what it was and like when it fell off or when it was added. So in addition to making the list of the stuff that's active, to make a list of the stuff that's gone would be, I think, useful.
Yeah,
so
or that may be resurrected. Some of them, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, like people are leaving the space essentially, and we're not doing any exit interviews as to what the reason was for them, you know, going away. Not that that necessarily is always useful for projects that aren't around anymore. So
Yeah, there's always people coming and going, but a lot of times when people have left, it was for pretty obvious reasons. Not always, but yeah, sometimes it is. And then there's a lot of private people, right, who have their own things going on, and they don't want anybody to know their story. Those are some of the cases, but yeah, it would be nice to know more. But these days, it's been the opposite problem, so to speak. Like there's even more and more going on all the time. It's becoming harder and harder to keep track of everything going on. At least for me, it is.
yeah, I mean, there's stuff there's a lot of stuff that I miss.
I posted your link to this on the site that shall not be named, and so other people can check it out. That's very cool that it's actually curated and maintained. All right.
Yeah, there's a lot of commits.
So and that's nice too that it's open source where somebody could come in and or is it open source?
Yeah, fork it. Anybody can fork
okay.
it. You can fork it. You can also call it awesome. It's fine. Lots of them.
Nice. Okay.
And so the stuff that I'm working on now. All right. So
yes.
Introspection came out, and I was doing the upgrade so that we had an escrow contract in mainnet.cash that I should check on again. But I was doing the upgrade for last May of 2022. And I realized what could be done with Introspection even without cash tokens.
Yeah.
And I immediately went
out
and wrote a contract and a perpetuity, which means it's designed to pay you money forever. That's a contract that pays you money forever. And the first contract, the first iteration of that project was called Bitcoin Cash Forever. And it was a JavaScript like package. So you could go on the command line and type like yarn I or add Bitcoin Cash Forever, and you would have it on your computer, and you could create a contract by giving it your address, and it would spit back the address for the contract, right?
Nice.
So the idea is let's say you take 1 Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
And you put your Bitcoin in the contract, and the following period, it could be a week or a month or a year, it'll pay you back some fixed fraction of your balance. Right.
And could I ask, like, before we get into it, because this is something the first question that a lot of people ask. So could you kind of say why is it that was something interesting to you to make, that you thought that was something important to make?
So it goes back to my trauma, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I was this funny story by Herman Melville called Bartleby the Scrivener, where this guy like shows up on Wall Street one day and demands work, and then like does so much work that he goes blind, and he like just has a bag of gold, but he's blind and he dies because he won't eat, because he won't buy food. And so that's sort of I'm sort of in a similar situation. The way he got the end of the story is like he worked in the dead letter office at a post office and it messed him up. So I am really hyper focused on survivability, right? So I want a maintainable code base. I want to know which projects are leaving. And I want my social construct to grow. And I want people in my social constructs to be okay, not be starving, not be, under duress, to have medicine. So I'm like, my politics, I'm not a libertarian. I am a centrist, like I'm in the middle of the road, moderate, apolitical centrist, right? Like I wasn't involved in politics when I was living abroad. I'm not really involved in politics here. I'm not looking for political solutions. I just want, people should be able to work for money and use that money to satisfy their needs. And so when you onboard people into Bitcoin, half of them will say, well, how do I cash out, right?
Right.
So if you onboard 100 people, 50 of them just want to cash out, right?
Right.
And then maybe 25% of them will hold on to it until they hear about Bitcoin in the news, and then they sell it, and then they're done. Maybe 10 of them will just keep it forever and never spend it, right? So they're not using it as a currency either. And then the last group of people, they end up being degen traders, right? So we've been filtered. We look around and we're like, oh, everybody's using Bitcoin as a currency still because there's Bitcoin Cash and you can use it.
Yes.
But really, we've been filtered so many times that we're a bunch of boulders in a fast, running stream, and we don't realize that like we're not like the other, bits of Earth.
I like to think we're like the refined diamonds that came out of the process is the way I like to think of it. But yeah.
So
boulders in the stream. Yeah, fair.
If what I wanted, so I don't have the discipline to not spend all my Bitcoin. I've spent all my Bitcoin to do certain things like several times. Like, I mean, I bought a plane ticket to go to Paris because I had to. It's the reason I bought Bitcoin. So buying it on a plane ticket, and I saw Notre Dame like 6 months before it burned, and you cannot go back and buy a plane ticket again to see Notre Dame not burnt, right? And so, sometimes, if another just hint for anybody, huge life lesson. If anybody ever says that their birthday is not important or you don't need to get them a Christmas present or a Valentine's Day present, they are lying. And you actually have to do that. You have to send somebody flowers on Valentine's Day if they are your Valentine, or something. And if they say that you don't have to and that you don't need to do it this year, they're not telling you the truth. So sometimes you have to spend Bitcoin. And so the idea of Bitcoin Cash Forever, this perpetuity, is that you always have some Bitcoin coming in, right? You cannot spend all your Bitcoin. You always got, a monthly allowance that will accumulate. But more importantly, if you give 100 people a perpetuity, in 10 years, you're still going to have 100 users, right?
Yeah.
So if this funny guy, when I heard a saying once, it was, if you marry 3 times, you're down to 1/8 of your money, which is like if you give half of your money away each time you get married in alimony, then, you marry 3 times, you're down to 1/8 of your money. What we forked 3 times, so we're down to like, the users were just divided in half each time, we'd be down to 1/8 of our users. Right? But if we have perpetuities where it's the default way of saving money, then we can fork, 100 times, and we're still going to have those 100 users, as long as the perpetuity works.
I like to think that we're not going to fork another 100 times, but yeah.
Yeah, there's other problems that come with a fork. The breaking of network effect is still very real. But yeah, okay.
Right.
So even if you don't have a split, though, the point is, I think, or at least another point would be that if you onboard somebody by giving them a handful of Bitcoin Cash, that's one thing. But if you onboard somebody by being like, here's a perpetuity, and it's going to pay to you for the next, 1 year or 5 months or whatever it is, that's a different thing. So like once a week, it's going to pay to you.
You're talking about an annuity. So this is I have to talk about this. This is very important.
Oh, okay.
There is an annuity in unspent.app. Don't use unspent.app. It's bad, right? Everybody, because an annuity is something that you can buy, like pensioners in the UK, they buy annuities when they retire, right?
Yes.
It's a normal thing it's a normal financial instrument that is available to everybody. It's something that you can get. A perpetuity is not something normal that you can get. Like theoretically, if you really wanted one, you could go get one, but they're theoretically not possible, right? They're not supposed to be possible. And there's actually something called the rule against perpetuities, which is like you can't legally encumber something for like, thousands of years. You can't encumber properties beyond like 99 years or something. There's different rules for 21.
So quickly, can you, for the audience, I think I got it from your description there, but can you differentiate at a high level, what's the difference between the thing that I described, and you said that's not a good idea, and the perpetuity? Can you just quickly describe the difference between those?
Right. So if you want to, let's say you have a Bitcoin, and instead of splitting it into 1%, you made it pay out evenly 1% in every period. So it pays 0.01, it pays a fixed amount every period. So every month, let's do it for 10 months, right? So you do 0.1 Bitcoin every 10 months. So today, if you put Bitcoin into it, it might give you $30 next month, right? For the first 0.1. And then for the next 10 months, it would probably pay you about $30 each time, depending on, what the market is going to do. But if you do it a slightly different way, so instead of paying a fixed amount, you pay a fixed fraction, so like 10%, then there's like a half-life in there. So the first month, the payment would be the same, but the next month, the payment would be slightly less because you're paying out 10% of 0.9 remaining, right?
Right.
And so with this little hack of like paying out a fraction, you can pay out, basically the amount getting paid in Satoshis declines slightly, but it goes on for a much, much longer period, like 30 years, right? So
in one number system, it would go on forever, but in the limited system of Bitcoin, where there's finite numbers and integers, eventually it hits a limit, and that's everything.
So if this is I'm on the third iteration of this, version 2, I'm calling it. So the first iteration only paid to public key addresses. That was the version 0. And then the next official release, it paid to locking byte script.
Yeah.
And so the user doesn't need to know what that means, but basically you could either send it to another contract, or you could send it to like a normal wallet address. And then the third iteration made it so that when the balance gets super low, the contract liquidates. So if you get under 100,000 Satoshis with either an annuity or a perpetuity, it's going to let you liquidate all the funds. It's going to let you pull out the whole 100,000 Satoshis.
Right.
So theoretically, if I wanted to, if I knew that we were going to have fractional Satoshis, and if I knew what the fee schedule 30 years from now would be, then I could do, instead of saying like, okay, pay a fixed, 1,500 Satoshi fee or allowance for the executor, I can say, okay, give like 1/1000th to the executor for fees, right? And then that's the floating number that will slowly decrease into the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So today, if you go, today, if you go and create a perpetuity, it's going to pay out 1,500 Satoshis every month for it to be executed. And that number kind of becomes significant towards the really long end tail of the thing. Right. And that's what makes it run out.
Right. Yeah, there's always going to be some cutoff point, for practical cutoff point. So
I have,
or else it'll just get locked up.
Just to stay on why you don't want an annuity.
Yes, that's what I wanted to go back to. Yeah.
Right. So the example that I have where you put in a Bitcoin and you get 0.1 back for 10 months, that's nothing. Who cares about $30, right? Like that is not going to be life-changing. That's not going to be whatever, right? if you put in, you can do the same. You can get $30 with a perpetuity, and like I have contracts where it pays out a 20th of the total every month, but the balance keeps going up because of the way that Bitcoin has been going. So the first point is that an annuity is not going to get you a total return, a good return on your money, probably because it's going to be very near term. And then it's going to end. So you're going to be out of our social constructs. Nobody's going to be sending you money every month. That's bad. Nobody wants to run out of money. If you could be paid money forever, or you could have a contract that stopped paying you money, you should choose the contract that pays you forever. And then finally, in the case that, like, you know, if we woke up tomorrow and because of this talk, like, you know, Bitcoin was at like 30,000 Bitcoin Cash, right? Well, that would also be bad because you'd have like tons of money coming and your contract blew up because the price of Bitcoin blew up, right? So, and then it's going to run out. So it's not great. You know, everybody, like, user after user, they keep going in and making an annuity, and it's maddening because you got to think about, just look at 5 and 10 and 20 years from now. You still want to have Bitcoin Cash coming to you every month. I don't know. That's so anyway. So there was a lot of complexity in my first app around this idea called unspent.app, or unspent Phi, the Greek letter Phi. And so there's like 5 contracts in there. There's annuities, there's perpetuities, there's faucets, divide, and then a utility function. There's an explorer, and you can like call contracts with this. Anyone can spend. And so yeah, I've tried to simplify it a lot with a simpler version called unspent.cash, to just sort of beeline people into the perpetuity and not distract them with a bunch of complicated stuff. Does that make sense?
Got it. Okay, I just posted that as well. Unspent.cash is the app that people should use,
Yes.
right? That's the one that they should go to and check out. Okay,
It's
so you have
the first one, the first app that they should use before they do anything else. They should go to unspent.cash and go through. There's documentation on there. This is what I've been spending about 5 months on. The app is easy to code, but so there is about 20 placards with pictures showing users how to, sort of what I've explained about the perpetuity, what it does, and how to download a wallet, how to back up your seed, because unspent.cash is not a wallet. I want people using Bitcoin Cash. I don't want people just, having it in a web app. So it shows them how to download a wallet, download their seed, back up their seed, hide their seed, and then use the app once. And that's all you need to do. So once you put a Bitcoin in it, or it'll work pretty effectively if you just put like 0.1 Bitcoin in it. If you put today $30 of Bitcoin into a perpetuity, that'll be fine. It'll work and you can see how it works, and it should start paying you every month, and you won't get eaten alive with fees. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So people who are responsible, or who don't trust themselves, or I say that lightly, right? Who don't trust themselves not to spend whatever. They want to have some discipline, help with discipline. Then this can help people to stay safe, as you were saying, to keep yourself in a stable state where you're getting paid regularly, as opposed to just walking around with a big lump of cash. And then I think, I assume you also are thinking that this encourages you to just use it as money, right? To take the amount that you get from it and use that as money, and leaves your savings as a different thing. And then this is the money you get, and you spend it for life and taking care of business. Is that fair? That's a way that you would like people to use it.
So in the future, it's not just like a spendthrift app. If you look at really, 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 really rich people.
Mhm.
I'm not going to say names because it could be, but people with all the money in the world, they use irrevocable perpetuities to store their wealth, multi-generational wealth. If you are a billionaire and maybe you got your billions in a not too scrupulous way, and you want to not have your billions, an irrevocable perpetuity is something that's often done by billionaires in the US. And so there's lots of, like, I'm not a tax lawyer, I'm not giving legal advice or tax advice, but there's different tax and legal ramifications of not having any money, if that makes sense.
Right. Okay. So it's a vehicle for different strategies also.
Yeah,
Right.
I do want to ask about a more technical side of this. So you mentioned like longer timelines, like 20 years, 30 years into the future. So one thing about this contracts on Bitcoin Cash, though, or well as basically contracts on any other kind of chain, although some of them hide it better, is the fact that someone needs to make the transactions. And some chains hide it very well, but at the end of the day, you can make your script such that nobody can steal your coins. But regardless of whether that guy is stealing your coins, somebody has to actually, do the thing and make the transaction
Right.
and pay it out. So like right now, you can probably do it, but I mean, we've probably talked about this somewhere else before, but I would like to hear you talk a little bit about the mechanism. Like 20 years from now, who's going to do those transactions to pay it out?
Okay. So the script uses a novel approach to a validation, I guess. So normally in a normal Bitcoin transaction, like Alice pays Bob, and then Bob signs his UTXOs to spend his coins. And so the way that all of the unspent phi sort of contracts work is that instead of being constrained by private keys or by signatures, they're either constrained by time or the rules of introspection. So that allows the possibility for an anyone can spend transaction. And so as long as the parameters to unlock the contract are known and the existence of the contract are known, then I may go fund a transaction today, and then next month someone can see that they can claim, they can't claim the full 1,500 Satoshis from building a transaction that satisfies the parameters, which basically the first output, you have to pay the person that's supposed to be paid. So if Alice creates a perpetuity for Bob, then the contract, the person building the contract has to go and calculate how much Bob is supposed to get that month. So divide by 96 is the default. And then they have the second output, they have to send the balance back to the contract itself. So it loops back to the perpetuity and goes backwards. And then the third output is, well, the third or the fourth or whatever is unconstrained. So you have to abide by network rules. So you have to hit, I think the size of the contract is about 235 bytes. So you have to leave 235 bytes for mining fees. But then the remainder, which I think is maybe like 1,200 Satoshis, is sort of up for grabs for miners or whoever. Like you can throw your own address in there and send it back to yourself. So this is miner extractable value, but since miners are not interested in extracting, 1,200 Satoshis for building this transaction, that's yeah, okay. Yeah, maybe if we add some zeros to the price, they'll be interested or something. But the idea is that, so unspent.app, I should explain this right now. It's also not it's also a little buggy because I don't have any servers. If you want to make a nice app, I would highly recommend having servers. Unfortunately, for legal and cost reasons, I don't have servers. So basically, there's a number of hacky ways to go and use Unspent like app, the Explorer, and there's sort of a ghost work component where you can earn Satoshis by submitting these transactions. And that is, the Unspent app is supposed to be just good enough to allow anyone in the world to be able to go and call any contract that can be called.
And get themselves
paid
a little bit.
Well, yes, paid a little bit, or sometimes, if you don't have any Satoshis, it's all the Satoshis in the world. You can go do a lot with 1,200 Satoshis. And I think there's some other fun stuff in there. There's like some games. There's a faucet that you can call 1,000 times in a row once a week. There's divide contracts. It's technically like a little like hidden memo bot in there. And so, yeah,
very cool.
The idea is once you do it, somebody should be calling it 20 years from now if Bitcoin Satoshis have value. And
so
I think.
Oh yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it's still an active, like, growing economy. Like there's still like transactions that are not called. So if somebody wants to build something to like maybe earn a couple Satoshis, they could build something to automate it, and then I could throw my app away or make it, not so. I wouldn't have to maintain the app for ghost work anymore. Basically, I could make it more of an explorer.
So I wanted to just say that was a great question you named. And this is the same way that the AnyHedge contract works. It's.
Hello?
So my audio went out. Am I back?
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, it's the same way that AnyHedge works. It's basically minor extractable value where the contract is spendable by anyone, but it has to follow the rules. And the rules are such that, like you said, anybody can run, can make the transaction and make the thing pay out. But there's a small amount that they could get out of it by doing that. And because it follows all the rules, they can't actually take any money from the contract. All they can do is execute it and take a little bit of money from it as an incentive. And I think that's a great design. I think a lot of things are going to use this anyone can pay kind of setup for contracts. It makes a lot of sense, and it makes it more interesting for miners as well. So yeah, I think it's a good way to set things up. And once miners become more interested, and you could even make it not insignificant, right? Even in today's terms, you could make it so that it pays. I'm not saying Unspent.cash does this, but it's very simple to make it so that it does allow you to pay a more significant amount out. It doesn't have to be a tiny amount.
There's some, like, I took a portion of our fundraiser from last, I think it was December of 2022. I raised like 50 Bitcoin, and I gave like 25 of it to people that had written software that I was using. Nice. So there's a number of people, and I configured it so that it was pretty baller with the executor fees. I think I used like 3,000 Satoshis, so double what it needed to be. And so some people, maybe some people on this call, have been getting payments every month. From unspent.app. So yeah. And I was asking about that method before, and what do you think about that as like an onboarding? What's that?
As a disclaimer, I'm one of those people.
Yeah. What do you think of it as like an onboarding tool where you say, hey, instead of just giving you the money, I'm going to give you this thing that pays you every week? Do you think of that as an interesting, viable way, or?
I mean, I think so. If there's a lot about a current startup culture that I strongly dislike, and a lot about the zero interest rate policy that makes me not want to participate in that economy at all. But one of the things that they do is they measure growth by monthly active users.
Right.
And so if I say, hey, Elon Musk, I have this idea, and basically, you know, for $10, you could pay your user to come open up your app every month, and it would give them
Yes.
something, and it would last for the next like 30 years. Like, I should have like Elon Musk like banging on my door to like come take this feature from my app and integrate it into his X app, because like this is all that matters. The month of active users, like you just need to keep growing your monthly active users, and then you win, you know, the whole market in a winner takes all game. And obviously, like I have a moat around the business because I'm on business Bitcoin Cash. But it's sort of weird. Like you tell people the number of users of unspent.app has basically only grown. It's only going up. Like forget about number go up. My number of users is only going up because I have like an everlasting gobstopper app, and people don't get it, and I don't get how they don't get it. Yeah, so I mean, in my announcement, Roger Vera was like, "Why, you know, what's the point of this?" And I was like, "What do you mean? What's the point of it? Like, put it in a wallet, and like you have a user who's going to open up your wallet every month for the next 30 years." I don't know. Yeah. So the number of getting the number of users in the social construct to go up is really killer crazy feature, and I don't know. Yeah. So.
Right. Well, I think maybe the counterpoint would be that there's ways to do that. There's other ways to do that if you just want to pay people on a regular basis, whether you pay them in, because this could apply to Bitcoin Cash, it could apply to now that there's cash tokens, you could do it with cash tokens, or yeah, there's a lot of things you could do, but there's also ways to do that in a custodial way, which is often the case. But this one is more of a what would you say are the differentiators between doing such a thing in a custodial way and doing such a thing in a non-custodial, permanent way, where it's basically that's how it works once you put the money in there, and there's no taking it back, right?
Right. So there are a lot of traditional financial systems that have sort of morphed into single entity custodial systems, right? So in 1973, like there was a lot of consolidation in the U.S. equities market, and right at the point in history where it was becoming trivial to make a computer ledger to track ownership of a stock, at that exact moment in history, they decided that like the paperwork was too much and that they needed to centralize everything into a single database, right? And I think there were a number of recent instances in the past where like the fact that all of the shares are being held by one party effectively in a custodial way is problematic from like an anti-fraud perspective or an accounting perspective, if that makes sense.
From all kinds of perspectives, yeah, safety,
right, and then
etc.
So like part of having a functioning economy is that people should want to work and be rewarded for work, but there can't be any like cheat codes, right? And so there's people in the US, like the last, I want to say like 10 years of investing sort of trends is that everyone from like the top to the bottom, from like the smartest person who is managing their own actively managed fund to a teacher who doesn't know anything and just watches John Oliver, everybody is buying index funds, and you're basically buying generic shares in like the company store of like the businesses that are the biggest. And so that's like a custodial way of like owning everything. And that makes me really nervous because like there's no way that like everybody can just keep buying the big thing and it keep
We're not
going
herd
up.
animals, but we are kind of herd animals.
Yeah, I get really skeeved out by everybody doing the same thing and thinking that
Yeah, I know
gonna,
what you mean. I'm the
keep
same.
going up. I'm thinking about, so there's language where like you'll get a fund that holds the underlying instruments. So it holds the stocks that it's supposed to have. They would go out and buy the S&P 500, all of the individual shares that they are supposed to have, and then keep those shares and not loan them out, right? But as soon as the assets are on their books, they can begin doing weird stuff like loaning out the shares that are, supposed to be in the EFT, or allowing people to short the EFT and creating synthetic shares. And so, and then there can be funds that instead of actually owning the shares, they track the performance of the underlying securities. So you could imagine a gold ETF where the fine print of the ETF says that it may buy things that track the performance of gold instead of holding physical gold or a promissory note for gold. And so if you're just trading options and you're never actually buying the gold, the price of gold should never move, right? You should be able to go through some huge inflation event and like a global pandemic that shuts everything down, and gold should just be like rock solid on the same number that it started with at the beginning of inflation. If you can create an instrument that will track the underlying security without actually buying it. And that's sort of my take on the Bitcoin ETF, the BTC ETF, is like there's a lot of opportunity for fraud as soon as you get into custodial ownership. Yeah. So,
and there's a really neat thing. I'm not sure if you agree with this, but I think it's an inevitable kind of thing that like for example, if you had one of these perpetuities and you attach it to a token, anybody can do this, can take the idea. It's pretty straightforward. And then your perpetuity pays out to a token. Now you can sell your perpetuity and trade it. So there's such a thing that you could do as that, right? Where you end up with a spot market for perpetuities. But the nice thing is, even though that's a kind of a speculative market, which is fine on its own for me, if you start to have a market of assets that do similar things to what you described, but they're actually based on provable underlying things that you can look at and you can verify yourself, that really does make a qualitative change in financial markets, where all of the things don't become fakely independent, right? It'll be quite more or less transparent what all the dependencies are. And once those dependencies are transparent, there's a lot less room for funny business. Anyway, I look forward to that kind of idea of financial markets becoming more anchored to reality.
Right. So I think that, a perpetuity is a great way to sort of maximize the return of Bitcoins that you have today. So, if you gave me 50 Bitcoins, I would probably put them all in the app, or I would put most of them in the app. And then I would be out of Bitcoin, obviously, except for the Bitcoin that I get paid every month. But if I wanted to lock up more Bitcoin, what I could do is create just a simple contract that locks a Bitcoin for a year, right? And then go with a smart contract, with an NFT-enabled smart contract, and auction that Bitcoin for a year from now, right? So this is, I don't have time to code it right now, but so how much...
You can do even better than that, not just an auction. What you do is you fix the parameters and you fix the end date, and now you have a spot market of fungible, more or less, financially, not privacy-wise, but financially fungible perpetuities that people could trade, and there would literally be a spot price for those perpetuities. So it wouldn't even be an auction. You'd have a market for them.
But those perpetuities are all kind of bespoke, right? Like how much balance?
No, that's what I was saying. No, because I mean the balance, if you had the same end date and the same parameters, the same rate, the rate parameter or parameter, I think there's only one. If you had the rate parameters and the end date the same, then those would constitute a spot market for that named perpetuity, for that nominal perpetuity.
Right. So there is no end date to the perpetuity.
Oh, right. Sorry, not the end date. Right. Sorry. So forever.
So there's like...
It would just be the parameters. It would just be the parameters for it. That would be it. You would have the spot price based on a spot market based on the rate parameters.
So they're sort of pluggable. so a perpetuity can pay to any type of Bitcoin Cash contract. So it can pay to a smart contract. So if there is a contract that allows tokenized ownership, I think BCA just made one. You could configure a perpetuity to pay to that, and then you can trade that token for spot price.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't know if that fits the intent of it, but it's certainly another thing that's possible. But
and so just to give people an idea to help them begin to think about these perpetuities. So there's this common concept of like decay, or radioactive decay or something, right? So if you have like 5 grams of something and it has a half-life of 5 years, you should have like 2.5 grams in 5 years, right? If people took chemistry or something. So the half-life for most of the default half-life for the perpetuities, both in the .cash and the .app, whether you select one on a monthly basis or an annual basis, the half-life is about 5.5 years for all of them. So if you put 1 Bitcoin in, you should have about a half a Bitcoin 5.5 years from now, and 10 years from now, or 11 years from now, you should have about a quarter of a Bitcoin left. So over time, hopefully, maybe, I'm not selling number go up, right? I'm just selling like the social construct go up. But maybe in the future, if Bitcoin price goes up more, you won't be as noticeable because your perpetuity will go down slightly, and you'll just get a more level stream of income, which is what people really need. So
right. Okay, that's great. Well, thank you very much for explaining that. We're well into the hour, so sorry for keeping you longer. Before we close up, though, were there any other major topics you wanted to talk about? We've gone through a lot already.
I think that's the big part. So I have not I've sort of soft launched it, and I've like put a link to it on Reddit, and I mentioned it elsewhere, but unspent.cash is sort of a moving target. I think that it's clear, but other people do not think that it's clear. So if you go to unspent.cash, it's literally meant for kids, right? It's got comic books, it's got drawings, it's got simple instructions in their language. If you don't understand something, somebody doesn't understand something about what it's doing, I'm not trying to get kids to understand like Bitcoin scripts, but I want them to understand the concept that like you use the app once and then you don't spend the rest of your life looking at the price of Bitcoin, please.
Right.
So there's a little story in there, like, you do it once and then you go and you live a normal life like people should be able to do. I said I'm centrist. I'm not like, libertarian. I'm not like really a gun nut or anything. I just think that people should be able to buy shelter and buy food and learn and grow old and not have to do Kafkaesque dystopian things like work for healthcare or work, for healthcare in a pandemic with a bunch of other people that are working for healthcare in a pandemic. Weird stuff like that. So yeah, I guess.
Got it. So yeah, the link is there, unspent.cash, and you would like people to go and take a look at it and make use of it.
So there's a Telegram at the bottom. You can just come in and bark any orders that you want about what is confusing maybe, or you don't understand, right. And I'll try to accommodate.
Always, yeah.
Yeah, and then I don't want to seem like I don't get to speak much. Obviously, I haven't spoken much. I can speak obviously anytime I want, but I haven't. There's a lot of obsession with the price of assets in US dollars in cryptocurrency. And I think that's a little, I think that's a little weird if you actually know what's behind the dollar. And so I don't want to sound too radical. I'm going to tell a story about how someone else was radicalized. A young woman making $100,000, over $100,000 a year, 6 figures, She had a baby, which is a totally normal thing to do. She had health insurance in America, which is a totally normal thing to do. She was living in a major metro area. She had her baby, perfectly normal, healthy baby. She went home and she got a bill for $24,000 for having a baby. And she got, her insurance bill $99,000 for her having a baby. And so the healthcare that she was working for, because people in the US have largely stopped working for money. And if you ask them frankly, or you listen to them reason about their lives, they're post-monetary. They're really crazy, radical, the weird sort of backflips that they do with the way that they trade their labor is crazy. And so this woman, when she got this bill, did some math and realized that it would be better for her to permanently drop out of the US economy and stop working for dollars categorically. So I had a very unique experience in my life when I came to a decision in 2020, and she came to a similar decision, just completely on her own, with never talking to me. But yeah, that's her story. And I think that maybe, because we talk a lot about the price of various things in dollars, that can just be printed willy-nilly and sort of dictate policy about a lot of things. And to me, I don't think that the dollars are worth as much as maybe we give them credit for. That's the one thing that I want to say.
All right.
Which is radical in my country, but not radical, I think.
I think it's getting less and less radical. Hopefully, people are becoming more and more aware that it's not a bit of it's a really serious shell game.
Well, I mean, I don't want to, complain, cry poverty, because it is a very wealthy country, but like there are assets throughout history where the world just woke up and decided that it wasn't worth. There was no market for it, essentially.
Right.
So if you have,
I mean, that's the nature of our ape markets, right? They they go and then they run off a cliff. Yeah. At some point. Yeah. I think that's becoming less of a radical thing to think, as people understand a little bit more, as the just average awareness or maybe the median awareness starts to increase.
To bring it up to a high note, like it is possible to, make some money and working for Bitcoin Cash and doing things for Bitcoin Cash and sort of, helping the community or helping, the broader world, accepting it or, making stuff and selling it for Bitcoin Cash. So there is, an escape route if you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's for everybody, right? It's for just regular people, for business people, for people who want to earn a wage, for people who want to run a business. It's for all of them, right? It's just for doing commerce and business and means of exchange. Saving money, whatever it is you want to do, that's what it's for.
It works with almost no internet. It will work, if there's civil unrest. It will work if, the electricity goes out. It will work if all the flights are canceled. It will work if all the insurance is canceled.
It will work if the Swift network doesn't like you. It still works.
It still works. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And for people who are doing business, who are doing investments, you can do it cross-border without the enormous hassles that come with trying to transfer money through the legacy finance system and so forth. So, yeah, it's
but there's
very good.
The back leg of that is I've spoke with an individual who was doing international commerce, and for him, he was doing, I don't know, maybe $20,000 and $30,000 buys transnationally, and for him, he didn't like there was nobody on the other side for him to accept the Bitcoin Cash. And then
right. Well, it depends on where you are, but in some places there is more of a market for crypto. So there are places where you can invest or pay for something, and then it's going to be useful to that business or to that investee, to the person, to the entrepreneur who's running a company and being invested in. There are places where that works out better than others. So just, everything that's small starts in a niche. That's how it is.
definitely cross your T's and dot your I's in the real world, and pay for the lawyers that know about the stuff, because I don't. So I stay mostly just in Bitcoin. But yeah.
Well, there's to some extent, if you don't want to be part of the legacy system to the greatest degree you can, you don't fit into the frameworks. You just don't. You can't. And so it becomes impossible in some cases to really fit into the framework. So yeah, there's a gray area where you have to kind of weave your own way and thread a few needles and figure things out. But that's how every revolutionary new thing starts out. It always starts out like that. So we'll get there. It'll grow. Network effect will grow. The value will grow. The stake that various people have and the types of stake that people have will grow. Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll go
and I
there.
mean, it's also, if you just want to stay just in Bitcoin Cash, and you in the US, you can legally, sell what you make. If you make something, you can legally sell it for Bitcoin Cash, and then you don't have to deal with an exchange, and you don't have to deal with KYC. You have the right as an American, if you make something or you have labor that you want to contribute, you can sell it for Bitcoin Cash, and you avoid the whole, like, JP Morgan Chase freezing your bank account, getting KYC'd and doxxed and leaking. You avoid that whole scam if you just basically keep it in Bitcoin Cash.
Peer-to-peer electronic cash. That's what it is.
That's what it is.
All right. That's a good note for us to wrap up on. I think was there anything you wanted to bring up or shout outs before we wrap up?
No, it's pretty good.
Okay. 2QX, any shout outs you want to make before we wrap up?
Shout out to you guys, General Protocols. You guys were a big inspiration, and I looked at your contracts and the various iterations of your contracts to sort of learn the ropes and sort of get your work supporting introspection also was very critical. So thank you.
Man,
and
it was so
thanks for having me.
too. Yeah, I know. Thank you for those encouraging words. That's very, very nice to hear. We appreciate that. And I love seeing what you're doing too. Thanks for everything you do as well. All right. And thank you guys for listening, for joining us. And we'll post this on YouTube and a few other places so that anybody will be able to check it out and have a listen afterwards. So thanks and take care, everyone. Have a good evening, morning, afternoon, whatever it is where you are. Take care, everybody.
All right. Checking out.
Bye.
Thank you.